Last night I sat alone in the dark living room, holding my husband's old sweater against my chest, when I heard my name whispered from the hallway. Not spoken loudly, not kindly, whispered. My hands began to shake, my heart started racing, and in that moment, I realized something was terribly wrong. But I didn't yet know that one simple sentence would soon reveal who my family truly was. My name is Margaret. I am 73 years old, and I'm speaking to you now with a trembling voice because telling this still hurts. My husband, Robert, died 3 months ago. 46 years of marriage ended in a quiet hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and broken promises. When the machines went silent, I thought the worst pain of my life had already happened. I was wrong. After the funeral, everything changed. The house felt colder, even in the afternoon sun. The walls listened. The floors creaked as if they were alive. My children, my own flesh and blood, stopped looking me in the eyes. Conversations would pause when I entered the room. Laughter would fade into silence. I told myself it was grief. People act strange when they're hurting, I said. I wanted to believe that. I moved slowly through my days wrapped in memories. Robert's chair by the window remained empty. His coffee mug still sat in the sink untouched. At night, rain tapped against the glass like impatient fingers, and I whispered his name into the darkness, hoping somehow he could hear me. One evening, as candlelight flickered across our old family photos, I noticed something small but unsettling. A door I always kept locked, the storage room near the stairs, was slightly open. Just an inch. That door had been locked for years. My heart thudded as I stood there listening. No sound. Just the hum of the refrigerator and my own breath. I closed it and told myself I was imagining things. But imagination doesn't leave muddy footprints near a door. Imagination doesn't rearrange papers on a desk you haven't touched. And imagination doesn't make grown adults whisper like frightened children. A week later, I overheard my daughter Linda speaking to my son James in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to listen. I never spy. But when you hear your own name spoken in a sharp, secretive tone, you freeze. She can't know yet, Linda said. James replied, we need to be careful. Dad didn't plan for this. My knees weakened. I leaned against the wall, my fingers digging into the cracked paint. Didn't plan for what? Know what? That night I couldn't sleep. Footsteps moved softly above me, slow and deliberate. Shadows slipped under my bedroom door. I clutched Robert's sweater and whispered, what's happening to our family? Grief is heavy, but betrayal is heavier. The next morning I tried to act normal. I smiled. I poured coffee. I asked simple questions. My family smiled back, but their eyes stayed guarded, calculating. Like I was a guest in my own home. In the afternoon, rain returned, streaking the windows like tears. I found myself standing in the hallway again, staring at that storage room door. This time it was locked, but the lock was new, shiny, recent. My chest tightened. Why replace a lock on a room no one used? I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. Still I felt watched. Later, I found Robert's old diary hidden behind a stack of insurance papers in his desk. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. The drawer had been left open, as if waiting for me. My hands trembled as I held the worn leather cover. Robert had always said some things were better left unsaid. Now I wondered what secrets he took with him. Before I could open it, I heard voices again. Low. Urgent. She's asking questions, James said. Then speed it up, Linda answered. Before she figures it out. I stepped back, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Figures what out? What were they speeding up? Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like the people you trust the most are hiding something right in front of you? If this story is pulling you in, please pause for a moment and like this video, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe, because what comes next only gets darker. That evening I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the empty chair across from me. Robert used to sit there, tapping his fingers when he was nervous. Suddenly I remembered something he said just days before he died. At the time I thought it was the medication talking. If anything happens to me, he whispered, don't sign anything. And don't trust silence. I didn't understand then. Now those words echoed like a warning bell. At dinner, Linda placed papers in front of me. Just routine stuff, Mom, she said too quickly. James avoided my eyes. My grandson fidgeted in his seat, confused by the tension. I looked at the papers but didn't read them. My hands shook too much. "I'll look later," I said. Linda's smile cracked just for a second. That night, as the house slept, I heard the storage room door open. Slow footsteps followed. I stayed in bed, frozen, listening to whispers and the soft scrape of metal. A shadow passed under my door. I realized then this wasn't just grief. This was planning. And somewhere in this house, behind locked doors and hushed voices, was a truth about my husband's death and my family's intentions. A truth they were desperate to keep from me. I lay there in the darkness, my eyes wide open, listening to the house breathe. The whispers faded, the footsteps retreated, and a door closed softly somewhere below me. I didn't sleep at all that night. When morning came, it brought no comfort, only clarity. Whatever my family was doing, it wasn't for my good. At dawn, I shuffled into the kitchen. The air smelled like burnt toast and secrets. Linda stood at the counter, her back stiff, her shoulders tight. She turned when she heard me and smiled too quickly, like someone caught rehearsing a lie. "You're up early," she said. "I didn't sleep," I replied, watching her eyes flicker away. James entered moments later, already dressed, keys in hand. He looked surprised to see me awake. No one asked how I was feeling. No one mentioned the noises in the night. Silence filled the room, thick and deliberate. After they left, I wandered through the house slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, grounding myself. This home had held birthdays, arguments, laughter, and love. Now it felt like a stage where everyone else knew the script but me. I returned to Robert's desk. The diary was still there, heavy in my hands. I hesitated. Opening it felt like crossing a line we'd never crossed before. But he was gone, and whatever he'd left behind might be the only truth I had left. The first pages were ordinary. Notes about the garden, complaints about his knee, jokes he never told out loud. Then the tone shifted. The handwriting grew tighter, urgent. "I've made a mistake," one entry read. "I trusted the wrong people." My breath caught. The date was just weeks before he died. I flipped ahead. "They think I don't notice," he wrote. "But I hear the whispers too." My hands shook so badly I had to sit down. Robert had known. Known what? Known who? A floorboard creaked behind me. I snapped the diary shut. My grandson stood there, pale and quiet. He looked at me like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. "Grandma," he whispered. "Why is everyone so angry lately?" I forced a smile and pulled him into a hug. "Sometimes grown-ups forget how to talk honestly," I said. Even as I spoke, I wondered if honesty was already too late. That afternoon, rain returned, pounding against the roof with urgency. I stood at the window, watching my reflection blur. In the glass, I barely recognized myself, smaller, older, afraid. But beneath that fear, something else was stirring. Resolve. When Linda came home, she went straight to the storage room. I heard the key turn. The lock clicked. A moment later, James joined her. They didn't know I was listening from the stairs, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. "It has to be done this week," Linda said, "before she changes her mind." "She won't," James replied. "She's too tired, too confused." I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Confused? Was that what they thought of me now? "Dad should have told her," James continued. Linda's voice dropped. "He didn't trust her not to interfere." That sentence sliced through me. Not trust me. Robert trusted me with his life. Or had he? They left the room, locking it behind them. I stood frozen long after their footsteps faded. My mind raced, connecting fragments. Papers at dinner, the new lock, the diary, the whispers. That night I made a decision. I waited until the house was quiet, until the clock ticked past midnight. Then I crept down the hall, my joints aching, my pulse steady. I stood before the storage room door and examined the lock. New but rushed. Cheap. I remembered something Robert taught me decades ago. How to pick a simple lock with patience and the right touch. My hands trembled, but memory guided them. After a soft click, the door opened. Inside, the room smelled like dust and metal. Boxes lined the walls. A single bulb flickered overhead. On a table in the center lay folders, thick, labeled with my name. I opened one. Legal documents. Property transfers. Signatures waiting for mine. My stomach twisted. They weren't just hiding something. They were preparing to take something from me. At the bottom of the pile was a sealed envelope. Robert's handwriting. My name. I held it like it might burn me. Before I could open it, a floorboard creaked behind me. Mom! I turned to see Linda standing there, her face pale, her eyes wide with something close to panic. What are you doing? She asked. I straightened my spine, gripping the envelope. I think, I said softly, I should be asking you that. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The bulb flickered. The shadows leaned in. And in that silence I knew whatever was written inside this envelope was the reason my family had changed, and the reason they were afraid I might finally see them for who they really were. Linda didn't move. She just stood there in the doorway, blocking the light from the hall, her shadow stretching across the floor like a warning. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and steady, as if it were counting down to something neither of us wanted to say out loud. Put that down, she said quietly, nodding toward the envelope in my hand. Her voice wasn't angry. It was afraid. I looked at her the way I used to when she was a child caught sneaking cookies before dinner. This has my name on it, I replied. You don't get to tell me what to do with it. She swallowed. For a moment I saw the daughter I raised, the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Then her face hardened again. You don't understand, she said. Dad wanted it this way. Did he? I asked. Or is that what you keep telling yourself so you can sleep at night? Her eyes flashed. You're tired, Mom. You're grieving. This isn't the time to think. I interrupted. To read my own husband's words? She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Please, just give me the envelope. We can talk in the morning. Morning. That word sounded dangerous, like something would be finished by then. I shook my head and slid the envelope into the pocket of my robe. Linda reached out, then stopped herself, her hand hovering in the air between us. We stood like that, frozen, until footsteps echoed from the hallway. James appeared, his face tight with concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. What's going on? He asked. Linda spoke quickly. Mom broke into the storage room. James looked at me, disappointment carefully practiced. Mom, why would you do that? I met his gaze. Because you locked it, I said. And because people don't lock empty rooms unless they're hiding something. Silence stretched. The bulb above us flickered again. James exhaled slowly. Let's all calm down, he said. We're just trying to help you. Help. That word again. I didn't ask for help, I replied. I asked for honesty. They exchanged a glance, brief, loaded. Then Linda nodded toward the envelope. What's in it doesn't change anything, she said. It'll only upset you. That was all the confirmation I needed. I turned and walked past them, my legs shaking but determined, and returned to my bedroom. I locked the door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope heavy in my pocket, as if it carried the weight of every unanswered question in this house. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Robert's handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, careful, familiar. My vision blurred as I read. Margaret, if you're reading this, then I didn't have the courage to tell you myself. I thought I could protect you by staying silent. I was wrong. Tears slipped down my cheeks. They've been pressuring me, he wrote. Plans made without you. Decisions made about your future. I tried to stop it, but time ran out. My breath came shallow. Pressuring him? Our children? There are documents you must never sign without reading every word. Trust your instincts, not their smiles. And remember, love doesn't rush you. The letter ended there. No explanations. No names. Just that final warning underlined twice. I folded the paper and pressed it to my chest. Robert had known. He had been afraid. And he had left me breadcrumbs instead of the whole truth, hoping I'd be strong enough to follow them. Outside my door I heard murmurs. Linda's voice strained. James's low and sharp. Then footsteps retreating. They were regrouping. Planning. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle and creak. Shadows shifted as headlights passed outside. Every sound felt intentional, like the house itself was urging me to stay alert. In the early morning I rose quietly and returned to the storage room. This time I took my time. I went through every box, every folder. Old tax records. Deeds. Appraisals. Then I found something that made my stomach drop. A typed letter from a law firm, dated before Robert's death, outlining a plan to transfer ownership of the house into a trust managed by Linda and James. Managed. Not owned by me. Managed for me. As if I were a child. Or worse, temporary. I sank into a chair, the cold truth settling over me like damp fog. They weren't just worried about me. They were positioning themselves. Preparing for a future where my voice didn't matter. A soft sound made me look up. My grandson stood in the doorway again, his eyes darting nervously down the hall. He held something in his hands. "I wasn't supposed to show you," he whispered. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked gently. He handed me a small notebook. "Grandpa told me to keep it safe. He said if people started acting weird, I should give it to you." My heart cracked open. I took the notebook, kissed his forehead, and watched him hurry away. The pages were filled with Robert's notes, meetings he'd had, arguments he'd overheard, dates and times. Names circled. Words like deadline and pressure underlined hard enough to tear the paper. One sentence stood out, written darker than the rest. "They think Margaret won't fight back." I closed the notebook slowly. They were wrong. That evening I joined my family at the dinner table, calm and quiet, my face carefully neutral. They watched me closely, measuring, guessing. I smiled when spoken to. I ate my food. I said nothing. But inside something had changed. Grief had softened me. Betrayal had sharpened me. And as I listened to their careful voices and watched their cautious hands, I understood one thing clearly. This was no longer about documents or property. It was about control. And before this was over, someone was going to lose it. I slept with the notebook under my pillow that night, like a child hiding a secret, except this secret could decide the rest of my life. Every small sound pulled me back to the surface of sleep, the tick of the clock, the sigh of the pipes, the faint whisper of wind against the siding. I kept thinking I heard Robert's footsteps, the way he used to walk carefully at night so he wouldn't wake me. But when I opened my eyes, there was only darkness and the heavy truth pressing on my chest. In the morning, I moved through the house as if nothing had changed. I brewed coffee. I watered the plant by the window. I hummed an old tune Robert loved, soft enough that no one could accuse me of performing. Linda watched me from the kitchen doorway, her arms folded, her eyes searching my face for cracks. James pretended to read the news, but he didn't turn a single page. They were waiting for something. A breakdown. A confrontation. A mistake. I gave them none. Instead, I listened. At breakfast, James mentioned an appointment he had later that week. He didn't say where. Linda talked about paperwork piling up, how exhausting it all was. She kept using words like responsibility and burden, glancing at me as she spoke. I nodded sympathetically, playing my part. Inside, I counted every word. After they left, I returned to Robert's desk and spread out everything I'd found: the diary, the notebook, the legal papers. In the cold light of morning, the picture sharpened. Dates lined up. Meetings overlapped. Decisions were being made while I sat in the next room, unaware, grieving. One page in the notebook caught my eye. Robert had written a single line, boxed in red ink. "They are rushing because the second clause activates in June." June was 2 weeks away. My hands went cold. I searched through the legal documents again, reading more carefully this time, forcing my tired eyes to focus. There it was, buried in careful language. A clause that transferred temporary control into permanent authority if I was deemed unable or unwilling to manage my affairs within a specific time frame. Unwilling. They weren't just waiting for my signature. They were waiting for my silence. That afternoon, the house filled with unfamiliar sounds. The doorbell rang twice. Voices echoed in the hallway, polite, professional. I stayed in my bedroom, listening as Linda greeted someone warmly. Papers shuffled. Chairs scraped. A meeting. Without me. I cracked my door open just enough to see down the hall. 2 strangers sat at the dining table, folders open, pens in hand. A lawyer maybe. Or an accountant. James spoke confidently, like a man already certain of the outcome. "She's had a hard time since Dad passed," he said. "We're just trying to ease the transition. Ease the transition. Out of my own life." I closed the door quietly and sat on the bed, my heart pounding, my mind racing. Fear fluttered in my chest, but beneath it, anger began to burn. Slow. Steady. warming my bones. When the strangers finally left, I emerged. Linda jumped slightly when she saw me. "Oh, Mom," she said, forcing cheer into her voice. "Did you need something?" "Yes," I replied. "I need to know why there are meetings in my house that don't include me." Her smile faltered. James stepped in quickly. "We didn't want to overwhelm you." I looked at both of them, really looked. The tight mouths. The rehearsed concern. The impatience flickering beneath the surface. "You didn't want me to ask questions," I said calmly. "That's not fair," Linda snapped, then caught herself. "We're trying to protect you." "From what?" I asked. Neither answered. That night, rain returned again, heavier this time, drumming against the roof like an accusation. I sat in the living room with only a single lamp on, Robert's photo beside me. He smiled out at me, younger, confident, unaware of what would come after him. "I'm trying," I whispered to the empty room. "I just wish you trusted me with everything." A soft sound came from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. I didn't turn around. James cleared his throat behind me. "Mom, we need to talk." I waited. "There's a deadline," he said. "Things have already been set in motion. Fighting it will only make things harder." "For whom?" I asked. "For everyone," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. I turned to face him then. "You mean for you?" He stiffened. "You're not thinking clearly." I smiled sadly. "That's what people say when they're afraid of what you might do next." He left without another word. Later, as the house slept, I made another decision. I gathered everything, copies of documents, the diary, the notebook, and placed them in a bag. I hid it deep in the back of my closet, behind winter coats that still smelled faintly of Robert's cologne. If they were building a case against me, I would build one for myself. The next morning, I called an old friend Robert trusted, a man who had helped us once before with a dispute long ago. I didn't explain everything. I didn't need to. I just said, "I think my family is trying to take something that isn't theirs." There was a long pause on the line. Then he said, "Come see me." I hung up the phone, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. In the hallway, the storage room door stood closed, the new lock gleaming. I touched it lightly as I passed. They thought I was cornered. They thought time was on their side. But they had forgotten something important. I had lived 73 years in this world. I had buried the love of my life. I had survived storms they couldn't imagine. And I was not done fighting yet. I waited 2 days before leaving the house. 2 days of careful silence, of watching and listening, of letting them believe their plan was still moving exactly as they intended. Grief had taught me how to disappear in plain sight. Betrayal taught me how to observe. On the morning I left, the sky was overcast, low and heavy, like it was holding its breath. I packed only what I needed. The bag from my closet stayed hidden. I wore my black coat, the one Robert liked because he said it made me look strong. I paused at the front door, resting my hand on the frame, remembering how many times we'd stood there together, arguing about umbrellas or laughing about being late. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. That hurt more than I expected. The drive felt longer than it was. Every red light gave me too much time to think. Every familiar street looked unfamiliar now, as if the world had tilted just enough to keep me off balance. When I arrived, Robert's friend Samuel was waiting. Older, slower than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp. He listened without interrupting as I laid everything out on his desk. The diary, the notebook, the documents, the letter. I spoke steadily, but inside I felt like glass, one wrong word away from shattering. When I finished, Samuel leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "They were counting on your grief," he said. "And your silence." I nodded. "They think I won't fight back." He looked at me carefully. "Do you want to?" The question hung in the air. Fighting my own children felt unthinkable, but letting them erase me felt worse. "Yes," I said. "I do." We spent hours going through the paperwork. Samuel explained what I already suspected. They'd structured everything to look helpful, protective, reasonable. The kind of plan that only sounds cruel once it's too late. But there were flaws. Rushed decisions. Missing signatures. And one critical problem. "They needed your consent," Samuel said. "Or proof you couldn't give it." A chill ran through me. How would they prove that? He met my eyes. By creating a record. Confusion. Dependence. Witnesses. I thought of the whispers. The meetings. The way they spoke about me when they thought I couldn't hear. On my way home I felt watched. Every car behind me seemed too close. Every turn felt deliberate. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were shaking again. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The living room lamp was on, casting long shadows across the floor. Linda sat on the couch, her posture rigid. "Where were you?" she asked. "Out," I replied. "With whom?" I set my keys down carefully. "That's my business." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We worry when you disappear." I laughed softly, a sound that surprised us both. "Funny. You don't worry when I'm right here." James appeared in the doorway. "We need to talk," he said. Again. This time I didn't sit. I didn't invite them to speak. I stood, my back straight, my voice calm. "I've spoken to someone," I said. "Someone who read every document you didn't want me to see." The color drained from Linda's face. James stepped forward. "Mom, you're making a mistake." "No," I replied. "I'm correcting one." The air felt charged, brittle. For a moment I thought Linda might cry. Instead she crossed her arms. "You don't understand what we're dealing with," she said. "Dad left things complicated." I tilted my head. "Then why didn't you trust me enough to explain them?" Silence answered. That night I dreamed of Robert standing in the storage room, his back to me, surrounded by boxes and shadows. When I called his name, he didn't turn around. I woke with tears on my pillow and a heavy sense of urgency in my chest. The next day, the pressure intensified. Linda began leaving pamphlets around the house, articles about aging, memory loss, assisted living. James suggested I rest more. Forget about stressful details. They were building their record. I responded by writing everything down. Dates. Times. Exact words. I hid the notebook where they wouldn't think to look. Late one evening, I heard them arguing in the kitchen. This time I didn't hide. "She's slipping through our fingers," Linda hissed. "We should have moved faster," James replied. "What if she signs nothing?" James's voice dropped. "Then we make sure she can't." I stepped into the doorway. The room went silent. "Make sure I can't what?" I asked. They stared at me like children caught stealing. "That sentence," I said softly, "is exactly who you really are." Linda's mouth opened, then closed. James looked away. I walked past them without another word, my heart pounding, my mind clear. That night, as rain began again and shadows stretched across the walls, I understood something terrifying and freeing all at once. This was no longer just about property or control. It was about whether my own family believed I still had the right to exist as myself. And I wasn't sure how far they were willing to go to take that away. I slept with my door locked after that. Not because I thought they would come for me in the night, but because I needed the reminder that I was allowed to protect myself. Every click of that lock felt like a small act of defiance. The next morning the house felt different. Quieter. Heavier. No polite greetings. No forced smiles. Just the sound of cabinets closing too hard and footsteps moving too fast. They were done pretending. I drank my tea slowly, watching the steam rise, thinking about Robert's last words again. "Don't trust silence." I finally understood what he meant. Silence was how they erased me. By afternoon, Linda approached me with a folder in her hands. "We've scheduled an evaluation," she said, carefully neutral. "Just routine." "An evaluation for what?" I asked, though I already knew. "To make sure you're coping," she replied. "After everything you've been through." I looked at the folder. A doctor's name. A date circled in red. "Tomorrow." "I'm not going," I said. Her jaw tightened. "It's already arranged." "That doesn't mean I consented." James stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "Mom, refusing will only make things look worse." Worse. There it was again. Optics. Records. Proof. I smiled faintly. "For you." They left the room, whispering urgently. I went upstairs, packed another small bag, and added it to the first one. This time I included photos, evidence of a life lived fully, competently. Vacations. Celebrations. Me holding grandchildren, signing checks, standing proud. Memories as proof. That evening I received a call from Samuel. "They contacted another firm," he said. They're moving quickly. So am I replied. After dinner, I announced I was going out for a walk. Linda objected. James insisted on driving me. I refused both, pulled on my coat, and stepped into the cool night air alone. I didn't walk far. Just far enough to feel the world outside this house again. Streetlights glowed softly, and for the first time in weeks I felt seen, by no one in particular and by myself. When I returned, the front door was locked. I stood there for a moment, rain beginning to fall, light but insistent. I rang the bell. No answer. I knocked. Still nothing. I used my key. It didn't work. The lock had been changed. My breath caught. I knocked harder now, my heart racing. Finally, James opened the door, his face pale. "We were worried," he said weakly. "You locked me out of my own home," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "It was a misunderstanding," Linda said from behind him. "No," I said. "It was a test." They stepped aside, letting me in. The house smelled different, unfamiliar, as if I were already a visitor. I went straight to my bedroom. The bags were still there, untouched. They hadn't dared. Yet. That night I called the police, not to accuse but to document. I spoke calmly, clearly. I stated facts, names, times, actions, a record of my own. The next morning the evaluation was cancelled. Linda didn't speak to me. James avoided my eyes. The house felt like a standoff now, two sides waiting for the other to blink. In the afternoon, I received a message from Samuel. "There's something else," he said. "Something Robert did quietly." I met him later that day. He slid a single document across the table. "A recorded statement," he said. "From Robert. Dated a week before he died." My hand shook as I pressed play. Robert's voice filled the room, tired but clear. "If you're hearing this, then my family has crossed a line. Margaret is capable. She is strong. Any attempt to control her life without her consent is a betrayal of my trust." Tears streamed down my face. "There is a sentence they may say," his voice continued, "that will tell you everything you need to know. If they ever claim it's for her own good, know that it isn't." I stopped the recording, my chest aching. That evening I returned home with a calm I hadn't felt in months. I gathered my family in the living room. They sat stiffly, bracing themselves. "I know everything," I said. "And I have proof." James opened his mouth to argue. Linda cut him off. "We were only trying to do what was best for you." There it was. That sentence. The room fell silent. I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said, "for finally being honest." They looked confused. Relieved. They thought it was over. But they didn't realize something yet. I wasn't thanking them for caring. I was thanking them for revealing who they really were. I didn't raise my voice after that. I didn't need to. The truth had a weight of its own, and it settled into the room like thick fog. Linda stared at her hands. James leaned back, arms crossed, as if distance could protect him from what he'd just said. "For my own good," I repeated softly. "That's the sentence, isn't it? The one people use when they've already decided you no longer belong to yourself." No one answered. I stood there, feeling older than my years and stronger than I had in months. "Your father warned me," I continued. "Not in detail. Not with names. Just enough to prepare me for this moment." James scoffed quietly. Dad was confused near the end. I looked at him, truly looked. He was clearer than you think. Clear enough to leave proof. Clear enough to trust me. Linda's head snapped up. "What proof?" I reached into my bag and placed the phone on the table. My fingers hovered for just a second before I pressed play. Robert's voice filled the room again. Steady, deliberate, undeniable. As his words echoed, something shifted. Linda's face crumpled. James went pale. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls themselves were listening. When the recording ended, silence swallowed us whole. "You went behind our backs," James said finally. "No," I replied. "You went behind mine. I simply walked around and saw you there." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "We were scared," she said. "We thought you'd fall apart." "I did," I said gently. "But falling apart doesn't mean falling away." I picked up the papers they'd once slid across the table so casually. "You planned my future without me," I said. You decided what I could handle, what I deserved. And you never once asked what I wanted. James stood abruptly. What do you want, then? I took a deep breath. This was the moment. The one that had been building since the night I heard my name whispered in the hallway. I want my life back, I said. My house. My choices. And your respect, whether you're willing to give it or not. They looked at each other, trapped now by the truth they could no longer twist. The rushed plans. The hidden meetings. The locked doors. It all pointed back to them. I've already taken steps, I continued. Legal ones. Protective ones. Any further attempt to control my affairs without my consent will have consequences. Linda whispered my name. Not the way she used to. This time it sounded like regret. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said. But I am stepping out of your control. That night, I slept without fear for the first time since Robert died. The house was quiet. Not the dangerous kind of quiet, but the honest kind. No whispers. No footsteps. Just rain easing into a soft, steady rhythm outside. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Slowly, uncomfortably. James moved out. Linda stopped managing and started asking. Some days were awkward. Some days were lonely. But they were mine. I found the storage room empty one afternoon. The lock gone. The door wide open. Sunlight poured in, touching the floor like forgiveness that didn't erase, but acknowledged. I sat in Robert's chair by the window, holding his diary, and spoke to him out loud. You were right, I whispered. Silence tells the truth louder than words. I don't know what the future holds now. At 73 you stop pretending you do. But I know this, I am not invisible. I am not confused. And I am not someone else's plan. Sometimes the people who betray you don't do it with cruelty. They do it with smiles and soft voices and one dangerous sentence meant to sound like love. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. When someone says they're doing it for your own good, listen carefully. Because that sentence will always tell you exactly who they really are.